All right, so we've been talking about the poem "O Captain, My Captain" by Walt Whitman. We went through the poem as it's written and went through some of the vocabulary, which might not be words that we're used to. There's a lot of special figurative language in the poem, and so we translated that a little bit. I also gave you the handout where we have the poem as it was written, and then the poem in a little simpler language that we went over to make sure that we understand the meaning of the poem. Now, since we're going to be turning this poem into a narrative, we're going to want to think about how we do that. How do we take it line by line or a couple lines at a time and translate that into a story? What I wanted to do is I wanted to go ahead and watch a video, which is an animation of this poem. And I wanted to talk about some of the things that we see in it.
O Captain, my Captain, our fearful trip is done.
So I'm going to go ahead and mute that. So we're following the words of the poem, but we're using the images of the animation. So what are some of the things that we see? And what I'm looking for is descriptive words. I'm looking for adjectives and adverbs to describe what we're looking at. So the sky, for instance, we have a dark, ominous sky. We've talked about the despair in the victory. So we have very strong looking soldiers, but they still look very solemn or sad because the captain has passed away. Here we have the crowd. What do we see in the crowd? We see a lot of crowd. We see a lot of people. There we see somebody consoling somebody. So they're obviously back from a long journey, and we can see in their face both triumph and despair. And that's the theme of the poem. And as we talked about, this is actually, about the Abraham Lincoln. And after the Civil War was won, that the captain was dead. So what do we see? What sort of words can we see to describe those images? We can obviously use colors. We can say that the dark blue seas. We can say that the waves pushed the boat. We could say that the people were crowded on the shore. So let's take a line from our poem and let's add some color to it. Let's add some more imagery, some more visual language to the words to help us when we actually translate it into a narrative to tell the story with more color. So here we see the poem, and next to it on the right, you have this link to this is in the chat if you haven't downloaded it yet, or you can just look at it on the screen. We have the poem on the left, and then we have the simplified version on the right. So let's take a couple of lines. And how do we add imagery? Well, do you see the line, "There is blood, red blood falling"? We could, for instance, take that and we could say, "The dark red pool of blood stains the weathered deck." So it definitely, let me know if there's any words that you don't know what they mean. We can go over all of that to make sure you understand all the words. But you can see how I've added adjectives and descriptive words to the nouns and to the verbs to make more of a visual impact. So let's look at another one. Instead of "I hold your head in my arm," okay, we have that. You could say, "My sad, tired arms hold your heavy, lifeless head." So it's a little more dramatic. It paints a picture of a soldier wearied from war that they've won. So in the face of this success, there still is this despair because of the loss, which is, as we say, the theme of the poem. So I think everybody gets that. Does anybody have any questions about, adding imagery to the poem itself? Okay, I really just quickly want to touch on how we would translate the poem lines into a narrative. We talked about what a narrative is. We talked about that it's a story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the theme can be carried from the poem into the narrative. So I just wanted to give a couple examples real quick of how we could kind of translate it over. And then we're going to practice it. We're going to pair up and we're going to practice changing some lines over into more of a narrative format. And then after that, you're going to be working on a full narrative yourselves. And for homework, you're going to be recording yourselves, reading the narrative, focusing on how your mouth moves and the shapes and the pronunciation. So you're going to be able to take the narrative, indicate that you're going to demonstrate that you're showing that you understand the meaning of it, but also you're going to focus on pronunciation by watching your own video, and those videos will be uploaded to the LMS, and we'll all be able to comment on each other's videos later. But that's later on. I wanted to just demonstrate a couple of lines real quick. When the poem says, "A ship has weathered every rack, the prize we sought is won." We talked about what that means, but if we put that into more of a story form, we could say, "The ship barely makes it back to port after winning the war, but losing the captain." So the first in the poem, it's uses a lot of imagery and it kind of sets the stage. But in a narrative, this is almost like a topic sentence or an intro sentence. This starts off the story and really sets the stage. One more, where the poem says, "For your bouquets and ribboned wreaths, for you the shores a crowding." Well, we could say that in a narrative form. The growing crowds cheered in sweet victory as tears dropped on funeral flowers. So I still kept it imagery. I kept the flowery language. I'm still using a kind of a poetic sense, but I'm telling the story in more of a construct, more of the elements that I'm building together to set the stage, tell the story, to reach the climax, and to come to conclusion. So if there aren't any more questions, then why don't you pair up and we can have a breakout room here in the chat, and you can identify a couple, take turns taking a line from the poem and then turning it into a more narrative form. And I'll pop in on each different room and see how you're doing.